Well, good evening. Welcome to New Tracks Meetup. Really glad you could come this evening. Hope you join us many more times and tell your friends about us. We have a website, newtracksmodeling.com, and I encourage you to go to that website and register so that you'll get emails telling you about the future meetings and get the login information on that email for the Zoom portion of the meeting. We post the live streaming on our website, but we only send out the Zoom information by email. So if you'll register at our website, you'll get the email with the Zoom login information. Our next My Bill is May the 29th with Chris Course. And we're doing a special My Build just for the people that are building along with Greg and Chris in their Conowingo model project. And that My Build is going to be on March the 31st, but it's only for those people that are building along with Greg and Chris in that project. And we hope all of you, Chris has sold a lot of kits for the project, so we hope a lot of you are building along with Greg and will come and show us what your models look like. With that said, I'd like to turn to Paul Thompson for our quick tip of the evening. Paul?
Good evening, Jim, and everybody else. Okay, let me just get the share screen up here. Right, there we go. Now, what you're seeing here is a Digitrax throttle, one of several types, but what I found was operating on Fremo and the rest of it, this thing requires a battery, especially if you see the radio controlled one here. And what I'd like to point out is consider using a rechargeable battery. I'll give you two reasons for this, but I'll also note that they may not last as long as, say, a regular Duracell. However, if you have one or two spares kicking around and you put them in a charger while you're at the show, and there's always electricity around, and of course this always happened to me, I would have a battery and I'd be somewhere where I couldn't buy one. So having access to a rechargeable or a couple of them keeps you going, especially over a weekend when you're on a Sunday and you can't buy batteries or whatever. The one thing I would like to note is you have a little handy charger like that. And the one feature I've got on here that I found on this one is it will do NiCad and nickel methyl hydride. So I can do all kinds of batteries should I happen to have to buy one if I forget one at home. And basically that gives you a little bit of options for operating and you're not left out in the cold. And that's my tip for the week. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you so very much. We really appreciate it. Now I'd like to turn to our special segments in the show and introduce Rick and Maureen Hunter of Hunterline Models. And they're going to talk about their Hunterline weathering projects. So Rick, Maureen, welcome. Turn it over to you guys.
Hi.
Hi.
We are here.
Good. I understand.
We just have to do a few little clicks here.
Yeah. And then okay.
All right. What we want to do tonight, in the past few weeks, we've been trying to demonstrate what our weathering mix will do. And we made the weathering mix for our kits, which are all wood. So all our colors have been developed for wood. And back, maybe about 8-10 years ago, one of our dealers come back and said, "You ever tried it on plastic?" And I said, "No, we're not plastic people. So we're on wood people." And so one of the things about doing it on styrene or any types of the plastics, one of the chemical features of it is usually a plastic has the releasing agent on it. And to do a good job, you should be cleaning that all off before you do anything. Not with an alcohol base. The alcohol will dissolve the releasing agent and put the color on all at once, so you can just do it quickly. So what Maureen wants to show right now is this is just a cheap model, boxcar, no, gondola. And you can see what this side looks like. Here's what it started as.
Just a cheap little basic car, and I'm just gonna weather it up a little bit. I've got my creosote black weather mix, and I'm gonna take it straight from the bottle. Should have my gloves on, but I'm just gonna put a coat, one coat over the whole thing, just very quickly. Doesn't take long. You can use this too in conjunction with pan pastels, and it really comes out great. I haven't got a sample of that. If you go to our website, there is a link to a YouTube of a gentleman that does this to his box cars and any kind of plastic cars. And he'll put the black on first, and then use the pan pastels as well. It really comes out nice. So you just put that first coat on. Now, usually I would let that dry up a little bit, but you can, I don't know if you can see that. So even with just with that first coat, you can see it just tones it down a little bit. And then what I would do is I'd go along the top, straight bottle. I don't know where I should hold that there. And let it kind of drizzle down. It kind of just goes along the seams of that car, and it highlights all those little rivets.
You can actually count the rivets if you want.
And you can turn the car the other way, and I'd go from the bottom and let it kind of drizzle down from the bottom as well. Try to get it from that sheen there. There, okay. So the important thing is to let it dry, of course, in between those coats, and it's taking a little bit here to dry. But then you can just do some more dry brushing, put that brush into the bottle, dab a little bit off onto a paper towel, and just go for it. You probably want it dirtier up from the bottom. So I would just keep adding layers. And you can also use one of the browns or any other color that you would like, and add that up from the bottom as well. Okay. That'll take a good 5 minutes to dry.
That's the beauty of alcohol. Dries quick.
But it's just a quick and easy way to just kind of dirty up those cars. And then it can come to turn out something like that.
Rick,
Yeah,
Jerry's asking, could you dilute the weathering mix to make the weathering a little more subtle?
Mm-hmm.
yeah, by all means.
Just with alcohol.
Yeah, do not use water to dilute it. You have to use at least 70% alcohol to dilute it. And that'll give you a different tone to it too.
For sure. You could, and maybe start with the light gray. That would be a perfect color to start with. This is great to just show you here on that light blue how it can come out. But if you use the light gray, yeah, it would be a lot more subtle. And you can also afterwards, if you take one of our pigments, like say maybe the white or the shale or the cement, and you could take your brush, put it in. This is white that I'm using here. Stick it. Oh, this one's almost finished. Stick it in the bottle, and then dab off a lot of it onto a paper towel, and then just take the flat side of your brush and just maybe dab it, here and there. Just adds another dimension to it as well.
What Maureen means by a pigment, we wanted to develop putting a light stain on top of a dark stain. So the only way you can do that is to actually add a pigment, which is a paint, okay? And so we mix the paint and the alcohol and the colors, and then you can go over a darker color.
Yeah, you just have to have fun and play around with it. Use your imagination.
So because we're told to try it with plastic, we decided to try it with a lot of other mediums.
Well, I've got this little.
Oh yeah, okay. You go for the little plastic one again.
I'll just show you this. This is just a little house that was an old plastic building that just had those etched in bricks. If you see that here, all the reddish color bricks that are just engraved into that. What I did was I took some of my pigments and I just put it over top of those bricks. I'll show you. I'll use the white because it stands out and you'll be able to see it wet better. So you just take it and just put it over all the building. If you've got a large building, don't do the whole thing, just do part of it at a time because you want to wipe it off as quickly as you can. So just slap it on and then take a paper towel or a sponge, a small sponge if you have, and just wipe it off. Don't let it sit on too long. But you can see how it oozes right into those the cracks to make the mortar. There's white. This side I had done before, and that is the cement color. This one is the shale, and that's a white like I just used. And then afterwards, you can also go around and use your maybe light gray or your black as a wash and just, oh, where have I got it here? You could dry brush under the eaves, a little bit of black.
Instant shadow.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see that very well, but it just puts a little bit of a shadow there. And you could do that up from the bottom as well. I'll just dry brush some on there. Yeah. And then the roof of this building was all that shiny red as well. I don't have a bare spot here for you, but I just took the building upside down, took my brush, put it in the creosote black, and just spread it around that roof. And that's what gave the, let's see if I can get that into a spot here. Maybe this side's better.
The reason you do it upside down, then the stain will go into the tab of the shingle.
It just highlights,
highlight it.
Yeah, highlights all those individual shingles. So that's what you can do quickly with a little plastic building.
Rick, do you have a color that would work like you did the black on the coal car there? What about a color that would work on, say, iron ore car or something of that nature?
Basically there you're looking at grays and blacks. So the black would be really well, but you'd have to put a lot of coats on it to make it as dark as you can, especially all the coal dust and so on being around it.
What about iron ore, which is red?
Just add one of the reds into it.
Yeah, you just have to be careful, I think, when you're starting to add it to plastic, and we're going to show you on the rocks as well that some of the colors we have won't exactly go on the same color that it would on wood, of course. So you just have to kind of play around with it a little bit and see which color is going to work for you. But like we've got...
after you've weathered one of the cars, how long do you let it sit before you handle it?
10 minutes.
Yeah.
Alcohol, it dries really quick, okay? That's why we can do many coats at once in one sitting.
Yeah.
Okay, Okay, we wanted to try a couple other products. One of the ones is Hydrocal. This is actually a Durabond 90, which is a very similar material. So Maureen's going to start to get on this right now. It soaks up a whole bunch, but this is how we do our rocks.
I'm just using a light gray base here, putting it on straight from the bottle. I'm just going to do part of this. I'm not going to do the whole rock. I use this, we're doing a little N scale layout, and I use this on all our rocks. I put the light gray on first. Again, as I was saying, it depends on the other colors. Like if you want to get brown, sometimes it's a red that will give you the brown. So you have to just kind of try it out in a little inconspicuous spot first. And I'll show you some examples.
We like when you put it on any of the plaster or the Hydrocal, because it really soaks it up, and that means you have to buy 2 bottles instead of 1.
Yeah. But I used acrylics as well, just in conjunction with it. You know, when I wanted to get kind of a rusty color on the rocks, I skipped over to acrylics. So I kind of used a bunch of different mediums for that. So then you can take, I don't know, I've got that's light gray. And it's really best if you wait till it dries before you keep adding things, but you can take your black and maybe you can dry brush it if you want, especially into the areas where you've got the cracks and you might want to see, you know, a little bit darker in those areas. And this, of course, is going to dry lighter for sure. Some of it's chipping away on me here. But it's kind of nice how it just oozes into all the crooks and crannies. And it's pretty quick to work with. And now I'm going to try a little bit of, I've got burnt sienna here, just to see what kind of color we're going to get out of this on top of there. I'm not sure. So I'm going to dry brush a little bit of that. It's coming out a nice brown, reddish brown.
Now, does this soak in enough that if it winds up chipping, no one notices that it's white?
On a small chip, yeah, you won't notice it. But if it's a big, healthy chip, yeah.
And you might want to go back when it's all dry and take one of the pigments. I did that a lot on the layout that we did. I'm just going to try the white here, dry brushing a little bit just on maybe some of the tips here. Use the flat of my brush. And find some of the areas that I might think there might be white.
Depending on what part of the country you want to model, you can add reds, browns, grays, greens.
Yeah, so you just, you know, whatever suits your eye. This piece of rock, just I wanted to show you different colors. It's already dry, so it's all set up. But just to show you this color here that I'm pointing to was our Cordovan brown. It certainly doesn't look like Cordovan brown. And this one here is the burnt sienna. Came out really nice. That's what I used on this one, just to dry brush. And the bottom one here is yellow ochre. So you just have to kind of play around with it and You know, you really can't make a mistake. If you don't like it, just go back over top of it. And this is, oh, it's not coming. My white again. You might just ticked off here and there. Yeah,
So we wanted to try some other mediums, and a lot of the kits out there are vinyl based. So we've experimented with the vinyls. So we got all different samples of vinyl and plastics and hydrocal.
these little walls are just plastic walls. And this one over here with the door and the window, that's how they started out. So what I did with these is I colored each of the individual stones, not each of them, but here and there I put maybe yellow ochre. I took a fine tip brush and put yellow ochre in a couple of them, and a barn red in another few, and blue gray here and there. Just kind of randomly went over it. And then I let that dry. And then what I did, like for example, on this one, I took my cement, which is a pigment, and I brushed the whole thing over with the cement and then wiped it off with a sponge. So that highlighted all those mortar lines. This one here, I used the cement as well. I touched up individual stones and then took the cement, just painted it right over top, just like this.
One of the points we want to make is that this doesn't take days and days. It only takes a few minutes and you can have a wall done.
Yeah, just take it right over top of your little bricks that you've colored. It'll mute them a little bit, but it looks good, I think. And then just wipe it off. Just like that. It keeps the colors subtle in those stones, depending if that's the look you want, but I think it looks good. This one is shale. I colored the stones again and then took the shale and painted it over the whole wall and just wiped it off. Okay.
Rick, what's the difference between the stain and the pigment?
The stains are leather dye straight into the alcohol, and the pigments, we've added a paint pigment into it so that you can put it over the dark color. Okay, and we add colors in that too. It's just to make that adhere to the top surface of it instead of soaking in as much.
I see.
Here's another little piece of plastic. It's a little thicker than these walls. Again, I just individually touched up some of those little stones or little bricks, and then I used the shale. I put the shale right across it and wiped it off with a paper towel, and that's how it came out. And it's that color there. That's how it started out. These ones, I think, Rick, is that hydrocal?
Yep.
I think.
Yep.
This is hydrocal. That was a little stone wall somebody gave me. And the same thing. I touched up some of the individual stones there and then used my shale. I tend to kind of go to the shale. I don't know. I like the way the color the mortar turns out, and just put the shale over top of that and wiped it off with a paper towel as well. Comes out nice.
So we could use this to do that little plaster building that a certain person's going to do a build along.
For sure, that would be great.
Get the order in now.
Yeah.
We were doing this at a clinic, and we were part of the WOD from the NMRA, and the fellow behind us was doing foam, and we said, okay, let's see if it works on foam. This is the building foam. It's the blue stuff, isn't it?
No,
it's the pink stuff.
Yeah.
And my gosh, it adhered to it.
Yeah, well, this is what our little layout is, that we're just doing right now. The end scale is all the pink
It's all
foam.
the pink foam.
So I just took my crucible black actually, because I wanted it a little bit darker, and I did all the mountains in the black. And then I went back and put some of my lighter colors on, which you can do with the pigments for sure. Like a little bit of cottage white there, some cement over here, and some shale over here. And you can take your acrylics as well if you want to add browns and whatnot. The browns that we have in the dyes don't seem to come out like a brown when you put it on the foam or any of the rocks. They seem to come out more like a gray color. If you use some of the reds, they come out more to be looking like brown. Just a little tip.
My experience with foam is everything I've ever done over the years ends up in a pile of goo, and you start all over again.
Just quickly, another sample here is we've got some of Chooch's material, which is really nice. I really like it for walls. And we were just playing around with it at one of the, I think it was
at the Model Railroad University.
Okay, yeah.
We do clinics there every year.
Yeah. So it comes out, it starts out kind of like a beige color there. And what I was doing is I just put my light gray on it. Here I tried a barn red. Here was a burnt sienna. I put shale and cement on these just to kind of show you the array of different colors that you can get. This one here, you wouldn't think it, but it's Bordeaux. And Bordeaux is a very strong wine color, and it didn't come out like that at all. But it turned out okay. Yeah. So, you just have to take it and try it. And
we have a question from the Zoom chat from Craig Cassidy. How or where do you get the colors for your stains?
We're the first people that want them. Okay, we take our we want this color, so we develop it. And Maureen actually goes through a long process of little samples, maybe 50 samples, and each one is a different formula that you have to keep track of. And then we, by eliminating this one and this one, we come down to 2 or 3 samples, and then, okay, this is the one we're going to go with.
And if you're Irish and you wake up on March 17th, and I came out with 6 colors.
Six greens.
They were all green. Yeah, but we take suggestions from customers, that's for sure.
Like we have a color called West Side Red. Now, how that developed was that West Side Lumber had an anniversary a couple years ago, and one of our dealers said, I want to match the color if I can. So we said, send us up a picture or send us a sample. So he actually took pieces off the building and sent them up to us, and we color matched them exactly. Now, we can't legally call it West Side Lumber, so we called it West Side Red. And it's a dead color match for it. Just like our boxcar brown is a dead ringer for like CN and CP tungsten red.
This is a piece of vinyl, right?
Yep.
It's flexible vinyl. So it's got the bricks etched in there, and I just used the shale. Maybe I can try the cement here. You can just, it has black mortar, so I wanted to change that. And you can see the cement is it's a little bit of a taupey color.
You can see it's just like putting a coat of paint on it.
Yeah. So you just put it on and wipe it off again.
Another question from chat. What did you use on the pink insulation that caused it to melt? Because alcohol doesn't usually dissolve pink insulation.
No, this was years ago before they come up with the pink insulation. It was just your regular blue insulation. I forget what it was, but anyways, I made a whole bunch of tunnel portals, and I took the dull pencil and I made the mortar lines just great. And then I did something bad and they all ended up a big pile of goo.
They've changed the formula to make it where it doesn't gas out so much. I don't understand the details. I'm not a plastics engineer. But nowadays, if you get pink or blue or green, that doesn't matter. What matters is the number that's on it, which is a designation of how dense it is, therefore how strong. And the lower density stuff is more subject to reaction from something. But no, unless it was something else in your dyes or something, where you get your colors from that had a reaction, I don't think that the alcohol would have done anything.
No, this was pre-alcohol. I don't even remember what I was. This was back 15, 20 years ago, and I just don't remember what I did for it.
That was the white styrofoam?
Yeah,
Oh.
no, it wasn't the
No?
white. It was,
Oh.
I think it was blue,
Oh, okay.
and it just didn't adhere at all. And then somebody said if you coat it with latex, that seals the, so it loses its porosity, and then you can put anything on it. But I just didn't go there. I was so upset with it.
Well, I know,
Probably, you probably did use diasol or something like that, and I'm sure that would have real interesting impacts. If there's any solvent like that in a solution, the foam wouldn't last.
Yeah.
MEK would have just made slurry.
So our point is that you can use it on virtually anything. We, on our website, we actually have a person who does oil on canvas, and they did a sea scene. So the sea is bluish, and the sky is blue. And they used our sky blue pigment to do the sky and so on, because it was cheaper to use our stuff for the mass instead of using oil paints for the whole picture. It's on our website. But use it on anything, like experiment first. But you'd be surprised at how many things it does adhere to. And it's quick. This is the whole point. I've seen some videos on doing stone walls that take 2 weeks to get it the way you want. Well, we can do it in minutes. You want to show some of the stones up there?
These ones?
Yeah. These are some of the samples that we have used in the past. And if you find you don't like the color, start again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I think it's fantastic. I've learned a lot tonight. Thank you so very much, both of you.
You're welcome.
That's good. And we have a good few people signed up for our
Build along.
build along. I can't think of the words. This is good. I think it starts May 22nd.
No, I think, yeah.
And it goes 8 sessions of half an hour. And we take you right from opening the package to the finished product.
As soon as I get my money.
And it's gonna be great. Looking forward to it. Thank you so much, both of you.
Okay,
Thank
thanks,
you.
guys.
Now I'd like to turn to Andy Kinney for his Andy's Option. Andy, welcome.
Thanks, Jim. Hold on just a minute and I'll go on my share screen.
I'm sorry you had so much trouble getting the emails. I think we've gotten that all straightened out for you now.
You do. It's partly my fault, but I was having trouble getting registered again. Luckily, my buddy Bob Butler got me in 2 or 3 nights in a row, which I appreciated. So, but in case Bob wasn't available, I was going to be in trouble. So,
I'm glad we could straighten it out for you.
thank you.
Let me know if you got that message, the second one that says that has the apology line at the top. Let me know if you get that eventually.
Yeah, I think I got that. I did. Thanks.
Okay, good. So you're
So-
fixed.
Yep, I'm all set. Thank you. Can everybody see my blank screen here?
Yep. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. All right. So what we're talking about tonight is positions on the railroad, things to think about as you're designing, building your railroad or thinking about operations. Manning your railroad with the people you need. And I don't mean like Jim and Bob and Fred, but I mean yardmaster, train crews, station agents, things like that. So we're going to go through these, not really in depth, but just for you to think about and things you think might be worthwhile. Then you can go ahead and look into it a little bit more and see how you'd use them. In this picture here, somebody's in trouble. We got the big wig coming right at the camera, and there's probably somebody's going to get walking papers because he's on the railroad. Dan Thorne, our own Dan Thorne. That's Bob Butler. He's here also. And I'm going to say Bob comes up from Sandusky regularly to operate with us up here in Lansing, which we really enjoy. And Bob and I have become very good friends over the years. So I will take you on through this. And let's start here. Who will you need? And again, who isn't, Fred and Bob and all that? Who is the kinds of positions you're going to need? Just take this picture here, this image. You've got a yard. So you probably want to consider a yard master. It looks like a fairly busy yard. So he might need an assistant or a yard crew. You've got a couple of engines sitting there. So you have probably a train going to be leaving. With all the cars there, probably more than one. And some of these trains could be doing local work, local switching. So you're talking about multiple crews. And since they're doing local switching and industrial switching and such, is that a crew of one or a crew of two? An engineer alone or engineer conductor? You've got a station here. You've got train order signal in front of the station, which means you should have a station operator inside there, and he communicates with the dispatcher, and he's the go-between the dispatcher and the train crews. So they work the signals. You get a red, train stops there. The operator gets information from the dispatcher and passes it on to the train crew. So you can see there's quite a few different positions you can create if you want, if that'll work for your railroad. Okay, so depending on your railroad, what type of operation you have, the size of the railroad, the amount of personnel you're going to want to have, you may want some of these key positions. It is strictly up to you. I find that they add to the realism of operations, and a larger crew for me is great. We have a good group of people and we have a good time. There's only a few of these that are really mandatory, and I'd say really the only mandatory one would be the train crews. After that, it's what you would like to add. So let's talk about first mainline trains. Do you need a conductor on a mainline train? Oh, there's probably times you could. Say you have a new guy or a new gal, and they're going to learn the railroad. You might want to run them as the engineer and have a qualified guy as a conductor, helping them get across the railroad, show them what they have to look out for and such. But normally, I would say mainline trains, you don't need a crew of two. The other thing is if you got a bunch of crew sitting in the break room waiting for trains, sometimes you can send them both out together. And then if a train comes up, pull one of those crews off the train. If they'd like to be doing something rather than drinking coffee and eating snacks and that kind of stuff. Engineers and conductor work good together if it's a switching job. It's nice for the conductor to be able to handle all the paperwork, and the engineer just runs the engine. He takes signals from the conductor and works as a team. It can be a lot of fun. And here Jim Brewer is operating by himself, just as an engineer. And you can see he's got his work cut out for him. He's got the paperwork in his hand. He's got the throttle. He's got the engine in the middle of all his freight cars. And he's got a fairly busy complex down there that he's switching out. So you can see how a conductor would be kind of a nice addition for him. And he could just concentrate on what he has to do, which would be running the engine or following the paperwork so the cars are all put in their correct place. Yardmaster basically owns the yard. And when we're talking about these positions, I will note a little bit about a prototype, but we're talking about model railroading and how you would use them. So the yardmaster is in charge of the yard. He's the one that decides what tracks he wants what cars on, what tracks the trains will be built on. If you deliver cars to the yard setting off from a mainline train or something, he'll tell you where to put the cars. You don't enter his yard until he gives you clearance and tells you what track to go on. So he's pretty much in charge of that. He can also take the job of hostler, which kind of moves cars around, or I'm sorry, engines around and prepares them for the crews. If he's not too busy, he can do that. He can also have additional people helping him if he's got a busy yard. Cedar Hill Yard here is quite busy. It runs several trains out of here, locals, and then they also have mainline trains making set-offs and pickups from both directions. So that is a busy place. Yard crews are assigned to a yard to work under the yardmaster. He will give them their assignments, tell them what to do, and they'll go out, they'll classify cars or build trains. You can see Jim Brewer here is looking for a car, and he's probably been classifying trains at this end. And then down the way, Ron and Craig are working together. Probably one of them is the yardmaster, since they got a clipboard down there. And you can see Mr. Thorne is down there. Looks like someone else is in trouble. Okay, hostler. I don't have a hostler yet, but I will, because you can see it's kind of a busy engine facility. And there's a diesel facility on the other side. You can see the backside in the upper right corner is the diesel house. That's a job that can be pretty busy and can be fun. You're moving engines around, you're servicing them, steam engines, you're coaling them, your water, the cinders, you're dropping them. You might be running it into the roundhouse. The ones coming out, you bring them out on a ready track for the crews. So it'll keep you pretty busy. Basically, for our operation, the yardmaster usually tells the hostler what engines he wants and such based on the trains or the job. And the diesel's the same way. This facility is not finished, as you can see, and we've got a lot of equipment. Someday, most of them are going to be painted the black and yellow. There'll be a few others, but a lot of those are going to be all repainted. Okay, so the hostler, he received his assignments from the yardmaster for our, our use here. In real life, they'd probably be receiving it from the roundhouse foreman or the shop foreman, whatever. And they would work with the higher ups telling them what they want. Some places, the locomotives are left right at the engine house. Some they're taken out to the yard and actually put on the track, not tied to the train usually, but put there for the crews to get on and then make their tests and such before they leave. He would deliver the outbound power, as I say, wherever he's told to, or leave on the right track, and then move equipment around the engine houses as needed, and having engines ready for service. Now, dispatcher, CTC is central traffic control. He controls trains. He's like the traffic cop. He controls trains all across the railroad using that panel right there. And again, we're not going to get into it too deep here. This is basically the dispatcher is in control of all the trains on the railroad. You don't get on the main line till he's approved it, till he's cleared you, and you follow his directions across the railroad. And that would be through signaling. The next dispatcher here, timetable and train orders, is an older way of controlling trains. Basically, they haven't done this, and I'm not sure when they quit. When I was working on the railroad in the early 70s, we were still doing it on the C&O in Michigan. So the dispatcher uses train orders to give to the crews their instructions of getting across the railroad. And you can see the panel on the left there with the little green lights. He has control of all the train order stations across the railroad. He will flip a red or give a red to a train he wants to hand up orders to or hoop orders to. And the train, when it gets to that location, will have a red signal. He will sit there until he's got his orders. He'll advise the dispatcher he's got his orders, and the dispatcher will give him a green, and he can go on his way. The dispatcher also has the train sheet here, and he has to track the trains across the railroad by times at location and such, and that can keep him pretty busy. Let's see. Okay, this is a station operator. This is the go-between the dispatcher and the train crews running on the railroad. And you can see he's got the forms in front of him. The dispatcher dictates the orders to the station operator, and the station operator will get them to the train crew. And in the days of old, you had station operators at every station where they handed out these orders and had the signals. And they would talk directly by telephone to the dispatcher, and they would get all the information, and then they'd hand them up to the crew. Normally you'll have only one station operator if you're going to have one. And what he does is he will fill out the forms via, as you see, this gentleman's using a radio, but we do have telephones now. And he will get the dictated orders. He will pass them on to the crew at the whatever station they're at. And here's one coming, this is staging down here. So this crew coming out staging had these orders waiting for them. And so when they get here, they grab the orders, they read them, and they just go by the orders. Okay, station agent. For our purposes, the station agent only does one thing. And of course, station agent in real life did a lot more things. They were the people that worked with the customers, whether they passengers to get on passenger trains, or they worked with the industries, the companies, and they would order the cars when the company needs the cars, and they would also work with the crews. When the switch crew came to town to switch, they would give them a list of paperwork of what they had to do. If they weren't there when the crew got there, they'd usually be hanging up or in a box or something, and the crew would get the orders, and then they'd go to work. So here, I'd used this before, you probably remember it. Here, just say it's a location where the agent has gone out, talked to the customers, or called them by telephone and found out what they needed, whether cars to be picked up, cars to be delivered, and you can see they're coded. And also the tracks are numbered if they have more than one spot. So then this is a kind of form that the station agent could leave the crew. And basically it's telling them the cars, the car numbers, where the cars are at in the train. and where to place them. And this is the coding I showed you. And this is a spot. If they have more than 2 car spots or 2 car spots or more, then they'd put a number down. That's where they'd put the car. When they've got their work done and they're ready to leave town, these are the cars they're supposed to have picked up and should be in their train. And a third one would be if there are cars sitting at the industries or near the industries, but not yet delivered. They would be called off spot, and they could be sitting on a siding nearby, and they could have their own list of those. And it would be to pick it up from the off spot and deliver it to the company, just like this with this coding. So considerations, your railroad's type of operation, size and traffic density, all that's going to determine what positions you may want to use and how you could use them. Most model railroads will not require a majority of these positions, and there'll be a fair amount of them, the very, very minor amount of positions other than the crews, the train crews. On smaller or less congested railroads, you might be able to give more than one of these positions to an individual if they're qualified. As the yard master could also be the hostler. He could also do a couple other jobs, possibly if it was a very small yard. He could go out and switch at times when it's quiet. So you've got a lot of variation here that you can use. But I can tell you it's a lot of fun. My guys really enjoy taking some of these spots. And the nice thing is you can have them work in these spots long enough to really learn them and then teach other people how to do it so they can get qualified in a lot of different positions. And it really gives them an idea of what the railroad's all about and how it works. You have a guy sitting in the dispatcher's office with a dispatcher. He comes out of there with a completely different idea of what it takes to get that train across the railroad. Because before he goes sits with that guy, he has no idea what he's doing. He just gets a piece of paper and says, go. So he can really appreciate what the dispatcher does. And one of the other things is we have to report the trains at each location so the dispatcher can mark them down on his sheet. And a lot of guys are very, what do you want to say? They're not dependable on reporting, me being one, but I chalk that up because I'm usually making coffee. I don't get to run many trains. But when you see what the dispatcher goes through because he doesn't know where a train is at because they didn't report a location. And that is something that your station operator does. Every time a train goes through, he reports that train, but the crew has to do that since there's really no operator there. But the crews can appreciate what the dispatcher goes through. And I think overall or over time, it makes everybody better operators, and the crews learn to run a lot smoother with a lot less problems. That's basically it. Yep, that's it. So if you have any questions, please feel free.
With the hostler position, since it usually with steam locomotives, it usually takes a lot of time to get them up and running. Wouldn't that something have to be sort of like predetermined to like the day before?
You're probably correct because they've got to work the fires and all that. And I'm no expert when it comes to steam locomotives, but I would think most of these railroads, there's very few extra jobs that pop up that they can't handle. They're not kind of ready for. And the other regular jobs, they know ahead of time what engines they're going to use. And the roundhouse crews, including the hostler, they would have all that equipment ready to go, I'm sure. I suppose they probably have backups too. Say a crew redlines an engine and they have to get them another one. It's not like cranking the diesel up and giving it to them. So I agree with you. They'd have to be ahead of the game and have a schedule.
From what I've heard, they end up working all night.
Oh, yeah, 24 hours a day. Yeah, that's
You
right.
know, they're working overnight to get the engine for the next morning, because you don't want to you don't want to have it sit there burning up fuel for 12 or 14 hours. You want it ready when it's needed, not
Sure,
hours.
right. Even when I in 71, 72, when I worked on the CNO, Plymouth wasn't a big yard, but I was a hostler there. We had several GPs, GP7s and 9s they used for switching. And my job was to overnight on the midnight shift was, to fuel them, sand them, and have them ready. So it doesn't have to be a big, busy yard, and you still got 24-hour operation.
Andy, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Jim.
A lot of information that you passed on to everybody tonight.
Well, thanks. And the nice thing is you put it on YouTube. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So everybody can go back and look at it again if they want to and absorb some of your wisdom.
Yeah, there you go. I'm getting to the age now, I got to go back and read or watch what I said. So, all right. You have a good one.
Thanks again, Andy. I appreciate it so much.
You're welcome.
Phil, I was really impressed with the photos you sent me on the project that you're working on with Bar Mills One Kit that Gaylord Gill is going to do with his build along. And after Doug Coster is finished, if you'd like to show everybody those photos, I think it might be interesting. Phil, did you hear me? I guess not.
No, I have my mic. Which Bill? Me? Someone else?
Phil at home.
Oh, okay. Wrong Bill.
Yep.
The other Phil.
Yeah, I guess not. Now I'd like to introduce our featured modeler. This is the third time that he has been on our show, and I'm really pleased that he wanted to do it again. Doug Coster is really a fantastic modeler. And the other two times he came and talked to us about the Japanese short lines that he models in Tokyo and around the country. And I was really impressed with him. And he sent me an email and said he had some more information he'd like to talk about. And I just jumped at the chance to invite him back. So Doug, thank you so much for being here this evening, and I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Barely.
Barely. Okay, I'll try and put I'm using my phone, as I said, to to do the talking. Okay, so yeah, thanks for the introduction, Jim. As you've heard, I've done 2 sessions before, and what I was doing then was talking about the layouts that I've built over the years, Japanese N scale. And we went into a lot of detail about the layouts themselves and showed a lot of pictures and in some cases how I actually built them. But because of the way I built the layouts with a lot of scenery and the trains running through them, not just trains running along the front of the layout, you didn't actually see that many trains. So I thought I might do a session that went more into just the models themselves and also give a bit of a background about the prototype and the whole industry, etc. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. Yeah, my name's Doug Coster. I'm originally from Australia, living in Hong Kong now. And so good evening to everybody. It's early morning here. I'll put the share screen on. Hope that works. Right, so everybody can see a map of Japan, and hopefully you can see the cursor moving around so that I can point at stuff. Okay, from going back, talking about the history of Japanese railways, just briefly, in the late 1870s, various private companies after sort of watching what was going on overseas, I guess, after Japan had been opened up to the rest of the world, you know, saw that railways were a profitable method of transporting people and goods. So they started building small railways in various areas, mainly in the big cities to start off with, and they're sort of branching out a bit. And eventually, all of these, or most of these small private concerns were sort of taken over by the government and to sort of make a larger network. So we ended up with what was called the Japanese government railways. Most of the railways, or I think virtually all of the railways in those days, were built to 3'6" standard gauge. Most of Japan's quite mountainous, and but even though most of the population lives around the coast where it's flat, so as you probably know, narrow gauge railways are more suitable for rugged terrain, and they cost a lot less to build than using standard gauge. So yeah, most of them were all built 3'6" for scale, and so the network expanded quite considerably across the country, and that system, quite a large system by the time the Second World War started, in which a lot of it sort of got destroyed, I guess, and to get over the rebuilding started and etc. After that, they sort of changed in 1949 to what was called the Japanese National Railways. It's still continuing on pretty much the same. And that grew and grew. Obviously, it was all running steam in those days. It's interesting, the background way back in the early days caused what's even got problems now. Because in some areas, the networks was built by or assisted with British engineers, and in some other areas, it was being done by American engineers. So there was quite a number of different styles in the rolling stock, even the track work, etc., the signalling, which some of it had to be consolidated eventually when all these systems got joined together. So this system sort of grew up, and it was pretty much covering a lot of the country. Steam operated. They eventually decided, like everywhere else, that electric was the way to go. Started to electrify the main lines. So by the late, I think, 1970s, steam was disappearing. On sort of more rural or local lines, diesel trains took over where it wasn't economical to electrify. Otherwise, virtually all the rest of the network began to become electrified. And one problem because of those earlier differences is that half the country is on a different electrical system to the other half. Sort of roundabout, sort of across here, you can see the arrow moving. They're all using the same voltage, 100, 110 volts for this is domestic supply. But half the country's on 50 hertz, and the other half of the country's on 60 hertz. So that sort of affected the electricity supply for the railways as well. Most of the railways were sort of built to 1500 volts DC, except for some of the bigger systems that I'll go into a bit later. So this system was, yeah, as I said, mostly electrified, going quite well, except financially. So by the 1980s, through various reasons, serious mismanagement, fraud, etc., they had ended up with a debt of 37 trillion yen. I don't know what that is in dollars. A yen's a very small amount of currency, but 37 trillion is a pretty big amount of money. So the government decided they were going to do something about this. So they split the whole railway system up into 7 companies, 7 separate companies. And each company was given a different area to look after. So as you can see from this map, they're all based geographical areas. You've got the island of Kyushu down here, the island of Shikoku, and the island of Hokkaido are all run on separate companies. And the main island, which is Honshu, was sort of split up into 3 areas. So JR East is what Tokyo's around about here. And JR Central covers the middle section, Osaka, the other main cities around about here. And then the other side's taken up by JR West. So everything was still sort of running pretty much the same, but they're being operated by those different companies. So if you're being clever and counting what's on the screen, you can only see 6 companies. As I said, there were 7 companies. A separate company called JR Freight was also created to handle just the freight traffic. So basically all these companies are running passenger trains. So in their own areas, JR Freight runs the freight service using the tracks of all those companies over the whole company, the whole country. Later on, these companies, several of the companies, the bigger ones, became privatized. I'm not sure whether they're still running a profit, still paying back that debt yet, but some of those are being publicly traded. So, as I said, the majority of the trains are all electric trains. Passenger trains, long distance overnight services were very popular, but like in America, when passenger trains disappeared because of the competing airlines, etc., the same happened in Japan. So a lot of those passenger trains have died out, like loco operated. The majority of the passenger network is being run by multiple unit sets, either electric or diesel, depending on the line that they're on. So other than this government system, there was a number of private companies that still operated in the areas they're in. Mainly in the bigger cities, or in the very rural areas where the government didn't want to spend the money to sort of develop a railway. So there are a number of, they're quite large private companies running in the main cities of Tokyo, Osaka, etc. This is what they call the Big 16 that cover most of those operations. And it's an interesting system because if you look at, say, Tokyo, there's 9 different private operators. You've got 2 different, I suppose you could call them subway companies that are running an underground system. Plus you've got the JR system all running together. And they're all running in different areas. I'll show you some maps a little bit later on. Their lines are joined together and they cooperate in the running between them. Now let's go on to what I was going to show you next. I'll just show you some pictures of rolling stock. And these are all pretty much models, mostly the motive power. So here's a little tank loco. As I said, these are all end gauge end scale models. You can see the detail that's actually available on these. It's very nice. So a small tank loco. So in the steam days, that'd be running on a local or a rural line where the rail's sort of quite light gauge. A sort of smaller tender operated loco as well, where the loco needed to go a bit further, needed more coal and water on a sort of longer branch line maybe. Here we have a passenger loco. Most of the models I'm showing you are actually locos that are still running in preserved format. So they're sort of nicely decorated with all those gold stripes and so on, the lining. Yeah, this is a C57, quite a popular passenger loco, the 462, what you probably call a Pacific, with the big driving wheels for high-speed passenger operation. And there's another big passenger loco, the C62. And here's a mainly freight loco, the 282, what is it, a Mikado with the smaller driving wheels. This is D51. I think this was the largest class of steam locos that Japan had. There was over 1,000 different locos in this particular class. That's a D51. This is also another one. You can see a very different version. You've got that covered dome over the top there, different type of tender with an oil tank. Over the different parts of the country, there were many different variations of even the same type of loco. So, but as I said, steam died out. It was taken over by those dreaded diesels and the electric locos. So this was sort of a fairly common type of early electric loco. The original electric locos were all imported from, again, a mixture of England and America, but eventually they started to develop their own, manufacture their own. So a lot of the early locos had that little platform at the front with the trailing and leading bogies, as well as the main driving wheels. But eventually they got rid of those leading. I think they probably thought they needed the same sort of design as a steam loco, and eventually found they didn't need those extra wheels at the front and back. So this one's a sort of fairly more common looking electric loco. You can see it has 3 bogies. Probably 95% of all the electric locos in Japan have this configuration, BBB. They're all 3 are powered bogies. The center one has a mechanism that allows the bogie to sort of move laterally, so it can sort of get around the curves, of course. So that's one of the more original style of modern electric locos. Here's a more modern one. You can see it's a bit longer. The bogies are still 3 of them, but they're spread out a bit more. Most of them were sort of a bluish color. For whatever reason, they decided on a livery. And there was one class of loco which is probably similar to what you'd be more familiar with, the 3-axle bogies that were sort of used in a specific area for a specific task, but it was quite uncommon. So as I said, the majority of all the electric locos were all those BBB types. And okay, this is a bit of a rare one. You can see this one has a very small bogie in the middle, which is just used to, it's not a powered bogie, it's just used for weight support. So you've only got, it's actually called B2B as a configuration, 2 powered bogies and the supporting one in the middle. Not very common. It's just where they wanted a bigger loco, but the track probably didn't handle the weight of a full loco. You've also got your diesel locos. This is a sort of a strange looking one, probably. DE10, so it has 1 bogie with 3 axles and one with...
Doug, can I ask a quick question on that last engine? So the center bogie, would they be able to adjust the pressure? Yeah, that one, would they be able to change it to adjust the pressure on the track? So when they were on heavier track, they could lift it and have all the weight for higher bearing and therefore more pull, and then push that down, which meant they were less weight on the pulling and therefore probably lost tractive effort. Was that controllable, or was it kind of fixed?
I believe it would be, yeah, look, I'm not 100% certain, but yes, I believe that would be controllable. Yeah.
That's a very interesting concept, because you can kind of tune the vehicle, the capacity to the track that you have. And it's kind of very interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so yeah, we've got this. This was a very smaller type diesel loco that was used maybe for yard duties or light branch line operation. Quite a common model, actually. Even sort of has a bit of a strange wheel configuration. There was even smaller diesel locos with two axle bogies as well, which I didn't decide to put a picture of. And the larger version of a diesel loco would be this one. This is the DD51, again in that same configuration as we were just talking about on that electric. So the previous one just had one motor in that long hood. This particular one has a motor each end, driving each particular bogie. And again, you've got that supporting bogie in the middle, which is not powered, but yeah, would be available to control the weight of the loco on the track via adjustment. This loco, as of a couple of days ago, I think actually did its last run on the main lines, being superseded by other stuff. So been going for many years. There were some diesel locos that had the traditional like cab format with a full body, rather than walkways along each side, but they weren't sort of that common. So that's a bit of a mixture of the rolling stock. Okay, we were talking about the network, and as I said, there's a mixture of private operators, the government railways, etc. So just to show you how confusing it is, I suppose, this is the sort of map you see if you go into a station and you want to buy a ticket. This is in where are we? Central Tokyo. So you go to buy your ticket and you go, where am I going? How much is it going to cost? You can see how complex the network is. So the map shows here, the yellow one, this is this station. It's quite easy to use, actually. The system in Japan, it's very easy to use because they do have English in most places. The station names have English and Japanese, the maps, and there's always helpful people around. So, but you look at this, you see this is the station. Where am I going to? This one over here, it's going to cost 240 yen. You put your money in the machine, get the ticket. But at first sight, you go, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? So here's a sort of map of Greater Tokyo, and this is a map showing the private railway companies that are running. And as you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or so different companies. And they each operate in a separate area, probably because that's where they were running when they were first created many years ago. So, you know, this one here runs out to the west. This one here goes up to the north. Another one here goes out to the east. So they're all basically pretty much completely separate and self-contained. And the majority of these are also narrow gauge, but because of what happened when they were created and it was too late to change, several of these are also standard gauge. You're 4 foot 8.5. Probably what, 1, 2, 3, I'm trying to think, 3 or 4 of these. Actually, this one here, KQ, down the bottom here, and this one up here, Keisei, are both standard gauge. And this one over here, the KO, is a strange gauge. Again, it came about because it originally was a tramway system, I believe. They have a gauge of 4 foot 6. Quite rare. So we'll talk about those differences in the gauges and how they work a little bit later as well. So there's some sort of background lines showing other lines as well, which we'll talk about in a second. You can see JR's done here in the solid lighter green. So they're the private companies in the Tokyo area. This is one of the subway networks. This is a Tokyo Metro, has 9 subway lines. And as you can see, they sort of go from the central area out in different directions, or some go right across, all sort of interconnecting in the middle of the city. And there's another subway company which has 4 lines, which also does a similar thing. One has a circular line, and then you've got 3 other lines that spread out all over the place. And then you have the JR network. This is sort of a diagram rather than an actual map, but you can see you have, again, a central circle, the Yamanote line, which is quite popular in Tokyo for getting around. And you have all the other lines, mostly all heading out from that in a different direction, heading out north or south or west. There's only one line, this one here, that goes right across the middle. And when you put all those together, you get this mess. So you look at that, it's a nightmare. But if you look at each one individually and how it all works, it's all very simple. And if I go back to one of the previous, yes, go on.
In that last picture, how many people live within that little circle? The last, that very complicated one. It's probably like 30 million or something.
Tokyo has a population of, I mean, depending how far out you say Tokyo spreads, 20, 30 million, yeah. The systems in that main area, they say 8.7 million people are traveling on the train every day. There's 4,700 miles or kilometers of operational track, 2,000 stations.
I mean, you got to think about that. That's like everybody everybody in all of New York City, all the boroughs,
Yeah, yeah,
getting on the train every day.
yeah, yeah.
So
It's
it's
got
a
a couple-
huge population.
Some of the busiest stations in the world, like Shinjuku here on the western side of the city, has two something million people going through it every day. Now going back to this map here, where I showed the private railways, this center here is that Yamanote Line circle for JR, and you can see all the private networks go out from that. The very light blue cyany color in the middle, like maybe you can zoom in here. They're all the subway lines. So the subway lines cover that middle section, and then some of them go out a bit further. And the private lines also head out from that center area. So there's no government or private railways in that center section except that main line that goes through the middle. And even though all these companies are all there mixed together, many of their tracks are joined together. Obviously, only the ones that have the same gauge. So, for example, this KQ line runs down here to the southwest, and this Keisei line runs up this way to the northeast. So, in between where they finish, they also connect to one of the subway lines, and one of those subway lines is also standard gauge. In that one of those subway companies, even though it only has 4 lines, it uses 3 gauges. And the reason for that is because those subway lines are connecting to those private companies to run through operation. So what you can do is you can get on a train down here and it'll run up to here. It'll pass onto the track of the subway company, run through wherever that goes, end up on here, and then run out further out here to this company's track. So up here you can see Narita Airport. That's where most people might arrive when they fly into Tokyo. So if you live down here, you can get on one train and just go all the way up to the airport. And at those waypoints there, the crews might change between those different companies, but you're on the same train, you won't notice anything's happening. So they're in competition with each other, but they're also running in cooperation. So it's a very nice system. Okay, on top of all of that, we get to the bullet train, the Shinkansen network, which is probably what many people have heard about if they don't know much else about Japanese trains. Excuse me. So in 1964, the first system opened, but it was obviously planned along before that. I think even around after the war, they were planning on a high-speed railway network because they just couldn't get where they wanted to fast enough using a sort of narrow gauge system. So in 1964, they opened up the Tokaido Shinkansen between Tokyo and Osaka. And that was mainly also done at the time in 1964, Tokyo had the Olympic Games. So it was sort of a bit of a showpiece for the country, how well they'd developed and reconstructed, plus also for the convenience of the tourism and so on at that stage. So since then, it's developed to a series of lines that's, as you can see, covers basically the whole country. You can go from here all the way, part way up to there. The dotted lines aren't finished yet, but you're covering the main part of most of the country. So you can actually go from here. You start very early in the morning and go to the very end, which is this one here, late at night in one day. Even though I'm not sure what the distance is, probably thousands of miles, but you're doing quite good speeds along here. So the only thing you have to do is change trains here in Tokyo. The system runs from Tokyo this way continuously. And these lines are run by those different companies as well. Some of them have the same train that's used on all the lines. Some of them have their own trains that are used on their own Shinkansen network. And from Tokyo here, you're running up this way. Again, separate lines. So there's no actual join in the track at Tokyo Station. So you'd have to change there. They've also built some lines that go up into the country areas, to different areas on these different lines along here on this west coast over here. So this system's been growing ever since it started in 1964. It started running at 210 kilometers an hour, which I think is about 130 miles an hour. The fastest services on these main lines here are now doing up to 300 kilometers an hour, which is, I think, about 186 miles an hour. An interesting thing is these two lines here, the Yamagata Shinkansen, which is that little one there, and the Akuta Shinkansen, which is that one there. They run to sort of larger cities in the country, and it wasn't feasible to develop a full-scale line. Most of the lines are built on embankments or in tunnels or overhead. So what they did was they used either current standard gauge lines, or they converted narrow gauge lines to standard gauge, and they run their bullet trains on those tracks. They're at ground level with the minimal number of grade crossings, of course. So they have what's called mini Shinkansen. They're a smaller version of the trains. I think most of the trains are 20-meter long cars instead of 25-meter. And the speed is sort of reduced in those areas, of course, because the track isn't built to high speed specifications. But they've built those ones, and what happens is actually, because they're both on this, connecting on this main line here, you'll actually get two trains joined together at Tokyo Station. And so in one case, they'll run up to here. The two trains will separate. The smaller version will go up there, and the main one will continue where it's going. Or the same will happen up here with the one that goes to this line here. So the majority of the trains in this section here, you'll see two trains running coupled together to until they get to one of those breaking points. So yeah, it's a very interesting network with all of these trains sort of running all sort of mixed together. Yeah, there's a couple of, that's a very common picture you'll see people using, bullet trains running in front of Mount Fuji. Very, very typical representation of Japan. Here's a selection of different bullet trains run by JR East, which is running from Tokyo up north. The funny thing is this one here is the latest style. You can see they're getting sort of more streamlined. This one and these two are the only ones running now. Most of the rest of these have been retired. You can see this one here looks a bit more like the original bullet train that started running. It's just a different color with that sort of airplane type front and nose. Two of them are actually double decker, this one here and this one here would build as double decker trains to sort of facilitate extra, taking more passengers. And this one here, you can see, looks a bit bigger than some of the other ones. That's one of the mini Shinkansens. They're narrower, but they're also taller to run to those smaller lines that I showed you before. And here's a selection of trains running on the western side of the country. So they're all a little bit more similar in style. The blue with the white with the blue stripe. This one here on the left is basically the only type that's running now, and it's a little bit boring now because they're nearly all the same shape, size, and color. Whereas you can see with this system, there's still quite a bit of variety in the shape and the color of the way they've been painted. And you can see this one here with the really long pointy nose. This was the first one that was developed to run at 300 kilometers an hour. And certainly looks like what you'd think if you thought of the image of a bullet train. Yeah, here's an interesting picture. So this is on that smaller line that was up the north that I showed you, where I said they run on existing trackage. So this is one of those mini Shinkansens. So it will usually run on one line, and even though it was originally double track, they use the other track just for their normal suburban trains. But they do have a lot of preserved steam running in Japan, and so you can see here a bullet train and a steam train running parallel to each other. Quite an interesting situation, and you probably can't see how many people are standing around the sides of the track watching and taking photos, etc.
Is that dual gauge under the steam engine?
No, I think it's just like a guide rail because of the sharp curves. There is a little bit of dual gauge track around, but not in this particular instance. in some cases, you've got the bullet train lines, the standard gauge and the local line might be, this one would be 3'6". You might be able to see there's a difference in the size because all the steam was all 3'6". Okay, as you might think from all these different systems, companies, there's a lot of different trains running. So you need a pretty good timetable to cover all that. And this is an example of a timetable book. It's about I suppose it's a bit shorter than an A4 size piece of paper. And you can see it's quite thick. I think they're sort of 500 or 600 pages. And this timetable book is published every month. Not that there's changes in the trains every month, but there probably are some things. They usually do a major timetable revision every year. But there are new trains being brought in, old ones being retired, sort of changes in the services, etc. Seasonal time changes because of holidays, etc. So, as I said, they publish this timetable book every month. There's also a little pocket-sized one that you can actually carry around with you, because this is quite a heavy, unwieldy sort of thing to put in your bag. There's actually people that collect and buy these, and that's all they do, collect timetables. They've got a room full of timetable books on their shelves. There's a lot of crazy different types of collectors and fans in Japan who have very specific tastes, other than just riding on trains and taking photos and all that sort of thing and playing with models. So collecting timetables is one of them.
Just
Right.
so some people who don't otherwise know, A4 is about the same size as a letter size sheet of paper.
Yeah, very slightly smaller. Yeah. Right. So that's a bit of an idea of the background of the prototype system. And we'll now talk about the models. So because trains are everywhere, there's very few places, in particular big city, where you're not that far from the railway line. So even though they have bus networks and so on, the railways would be their main system of transport. So kiddies grow up riding on trains, seeing trains. They love their trains. So it's a big hobby, very big hobby in Japan. I dare to say it's probably the largest model railway hobby area in the world. We'll sort of talk about that a little bit later. So there's many different companies bringing out models, and there's also a lot of magazines. There's probably 8 to 10, maybe a dozen different railway magazines published every month that you can buy at the newsstands and bookshops, etc. Some of those might be about prototype trains. Some of them might be modelling only. There's one specifically that just covers N scale, and some of them might be a mixture of that. There's books that just take you on trips around the country where you can go by train and what you can see and do when you get there, tourist sort of thing. They try to promote that very highly as well. So yeah, there's lots of different magazines in that. There's people that just buy magazines and collect them and read them as well. So there's 4 main modelling companies and dozens of smaller ones that make model trains. And 90 to 95% of the model trains are N scale. It's probably getting a bit more towards more HO now. There's more plastic HO being developed that's more affordable. Originally, before that, most of it was all sort of brass or handmade or kits, etc., and quite expensive, which you can also get in N scale. But the majority of the ready-to-run plastic stuff is N scale. And the main reason for that is because of the space available. Many people live in very small spaces, small houses. They never have room for a train setup like we saw in the previous presentation, where there's a room full of a dozen people all running the system. So if they can build a very small thing in the corner of the room on a very small table, they'd be lucky. Otherwise, what they do is they spread out their track on the floor and set up something and play around with it, and then put it away again, which is the reason why, if you're familiar with Kato's Unitrack, with the base built into it. That's why that was developed. So yeah, you can sort of build up a system like that. So one of the first companies which you've probably all heard of is Kato here. It's actually pronounced Kato, not Kato, like a lot of people say. Japanese vowels are all very short. So they were one of the first model railway builders in Japan, and it's a private company. And as you know, they branched out into America and have a good selection of American stuff, very highly known about, commended their quality, etc. But they're also obviously quite well known and respected in Japan as well. And so this is just an advertising sheet for some of their models, as you can see up the front, the top here, February 2021. This is their advertising for the new models that are coming out. You can see a mixture of locos. There's a diesel loco, some freight cars, an old style electric car, some passenger cars, some more locos. So this is what they're saying. It doesn't always happen. This is what they're saying they're going to release in February. These companies, the four major ones and some of the smaller ones, they're announcing and usually releasing half a dozen new models every month. As I said, it's such a big industry. So this is their advertising flyer you might see in a magazine or up on the walls in a shop of just 1 month's models. Okay, here's another one, Tomix. Tomix is one of the other big companies, probably bigger than Kato. Actually, it's a sort of branch of the Tomy toy company, which does a lot of other stuff. So the models here, you can see some fairly modern looking passenger trains. Just give me a minute to pause because I'm going to have to move my computer and plug it in to the power. The battery's running a bit low. Luckily, I'm not on video camera. Otherwise, suddenly the computer will shut off and we'll all be gone. Right, I think we're okay again. Everybody still hear me?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
okay.
we can.
Yeah. Okay. So this is Tomix. Yeah, big company. Again, this is the models they're saying they're going to produce in what is it, July this year. Production doesn't always end up doing what they say they're going to do, of course, but this is their projected models. Mostly you can see there's some little diesel cars here, mostly electric sets here. See some quite modern looking, streamlined looking stuff. Right, okay, this is Micro Race. Micro Race, another arm of a very large toy company, the ARIE, I think it's called, Plastic Model Company, and other stuff they do. So probably 15, 20 years ago, they got into model trains and as a competitor, and they do more private, sort of most of the trains on this page are private railway companies or some locos here, electric loco. So they're probably third in line as in size of what's going out. But again, this is their, I can't remember what, doesn't say on the poster what this is, sometime this year anyway, because I picked it up from a recent publication, what they're planning to release in one particular month. And okay, there's another company called Green Max. Again, this is another private company. It's quite small. That also probably release several new models every month. Now, there are differences between these companies, and unfortunately, like in many hobbies, just to make money, companies have to produce what's going to be supposedly commercially viable. So they're going to release what the trains people want, or the latest trains that are coming out that people are seeing. So there is unfortunately a lot of duplication between these companies bringing out the same train around about the same time to compete for everybody's dollar, which is a bit unfortunate because there's so many different trains. They could all still make something different and still make their money. But anyway, that's the way business works. But the manufacturers, they do have their own specialities, fortunately. So Kato do a mixture of all different types. They're sort of got more different types of passenger trains and more sort of historical stuff than some of the other companies. Tomix do pretty much all the different bullet trains. If you want to get bullet trains, that's the company you go for. They also do a lot more of the diesel trains and more sort of local line stuff. As I said here, Microrace do a lot of these private companies. But in particular, Microrace, they only do sets of trains and individual locos. They don't do a lot of individual rolling stock, whereas the other companies do, you know, freight passenger rolling stock as well as train sets that come together. Greenmax also do mostly private companies. They're based in the Osaka area, so they cover more of the trains in that area than any of the other companies. They also do some of their sets as kits, either unpainted or more recently pre-painted. So you put them together and then you can run them. They're still quite good quality. So let's continue on. What I want to show you here is some couplers. So the majority of Japanese N scale originally standardized on the well-known Rapido coupler, which again is the sort of standard one you buy on the train sets in America. But there has been developed since then a huge amount of replacement couplers. You can see this is an N scale diesel loco. There's your track, your 9mm track. You can see the coupler here. Quite realistic looking, what do they call a Buckeye coupler that's used on diesel or passenger or freight stock. This is developed by Tomix. So you can see it joins two cars together very closely, instead of that huge gap you see with those Rapido couplers between, you know, particularly passenger trains. How do the passengers jump between cars when they transfer? So here you've got a very realistic operating appearance, and they're built with a mechanism that you'll probably see a little bit later on that actually swings sideways and broadens the gap so that you can still go around very sharp curves with this, and the cars don't touch each other. But when they straighten up, they're very close together. It's a very nice system and very realistic looking. So this is a coupler system used on a bullet train model. You can see, you might be able to just see here, there's some wires, metal wires here. The coupler has this sort of loop here, and the other car joining up to it has a hook that sort of slides into here, which also has wires on it. And what these wires do is transfer the current between the cars. They all have metal wheels and they have pickups on the bogies. And so all the power is running through every car to the powered car. So you're getting virtually foolproof operation because every wheel is picking up the power. It's not just the power car or the loco with a few dirty wheels that might stall somewhere. You've got a train of maybe 8 or 10 or however many cars you've got all picking up the power and running. So it makes very good, smooth operation. Right, here's a selection of the replacement couplers you can get. So up the top here, you've got this standard, this is from a post in a Japanese train group that I'm in that one of the members produced to show what was available. Here's your standard Rapido coupler up the top that you're all familiar with. And you can see the brands here, Kato, Tomix, Greenmax, they all make replacement couplers that pretty much all still slip into the standard Rapido coupler pocket. So there's probably no reason why you couldn't even convert some of your American rolling stock to these couplers if you wanted. You can see that the one we showed you before on that other train, it's this one. You've got a very realistic version of the coupler here where they join together. You've got another version which is a bit bigger and not quite realistic, but still sort of does the job. Majority of these won't couple up to each other though, unfortunately. So if you decide you want to use one of these, you've got to decide which type you use and sort of stick with it. These are all different versions of the sort of the Buckeye coupler, like your standard one that's used on most trains. There's also, whether I've got a picture, that probably is, let's see. Okay. This is the sort of type of coupler that clips in underneath the body of the car. The majority, those ones that we saw, you put in your coupler pocket on your bogie so that they swing around as the car goes around. But car mounted couplers are also popular. So this is the type of coupler that's used on electric trains. It's called the Sharpenberg, where this sort of hook goes into this side, and they sort of hook clip together internally. So this clips to the end of the underneath the car, and this is the bit that sticks out. You can see the spring here that sort of keeps it in centered position, and this sort of swings from side to side, and by the mechanism inside, it sort of expands outwards on the curve so that you still get the gap between it. So that's the sort of coupler you might fit to your electric or suburban type train. And here's the same sort of one with that normal coupler you'd see on passenger freight or diesel sort of stock. Again, different. There's dozens of these types, all to fit different types of cars. Some of them come with these couplers standard now. Tomix has what's called a high grade range, where these type of couplers and more finer details are on the actual rolling stock itself. You pay a bit more, but it's a lot more realistic. Or you can convert your standard stock to these extra couplers as well. This is sort of the standard extra coupler that Kato provide as well. It's sort of a simplified version of that same type of coupler that sort of hooks in like the hand. They also make a version that has these extensions on the side with the representations of the air hoses that you'd see normally joining all the cars together. This is sort of the electric type coupler here. The one back here is actually, even though these are both very, very small, they'll join together, they clip together, and they're very hard to pull apart. Using this particular coupler here, I've sort of joined two cars together, picked up one and swung it round in the air, and they won't uncouple. The unfortunate thing is if one car comes off the track, it'll pull the whole train off the track because they just won't uncouple. This particular one, this is just a dummy. It's sort of held together by this little clip underneath. But as you can see, when the two couplers are joined together, you see the representation of the air hoses that are joined the cars together. So when you look at the train running past, it looks quite nice. Okay, so the track systems that are available. There's basically two main track systems that are used in Japan. You've got your Unitrack, which you're probably familiar with as well, because Kato have sort of marketed that quite efficiently in America and overseas. Here's sort of a sample of their track on the left-hand side here, the different curves available with the different sort of radiuses. Tomix also has a system with different sizes for all the tracks. And they won't join together because they have different system of joiners, but you can overcome that if you like. The track height, etc., and geography is different, but you can join them if you want to. There's also a system of double track pieces, both sort of a concrete overhead type track and sort of the ground track that you use again in different radiuses and so on. If you're sort of familiar with the Unitrack, which is quite popular, it's got quite a small range compared to what Tomix have. Tomix have a very much larger range of track. They have 12 different curve radiuses going all the way from 103 millimeters, which is 4 inches, which you might use for a tram system, all the way up to 539 millimeters, which is 21 inches, probably a lot larger than what you might be running in your HO trains. They also have 3-way points, double slip points, curved, a mixture of all these different ones, which Kato don't have. And as I said, these tracks will develop. This is your common Unitrack. It's got this huge uni joiner, which is quite unrealistic in my opinion, but it's all built up on this base, like I said, so people can run their trains on the floor, keep it off sort of the dirt or the carpet or whatever, and pack it away when it's time to go home or use the room again. So there's another picture. Here's a comparison between some of the different systems. So this is Unitrack from Kato. This is the Tomix track. There's your sort of standard sort of flexi sort of track. I'm not sure which one that is. I think this one's made by Fleischmann, European, so it's got a track bed, but it sort of sits straight down. So you can see quite a bit of difference in the size and the geometry of these. They're both they're all 9mm end scale, which obviously is wrong for the majority of the trains in Japan, which are narrow gauge. This is sort of standard gauge track, but they've sort of learnt to ignore that. The other thing I should mention is that the end gauge models are mostly 1 to 150th scale, and the HO is 1 to 180 in end scale, except for the bullet trains, which are 1 to 160. Because they're a larger prototype, they've sort of scaled them down a little bit so they still fit on the same track. So your uni track here is a lot higher road bed. You can see the joiners are on a different side even, but you can get them off and you can sort of join them with a connecting track or whatever. The joining system here on this one, I think, is a lot finer and a lot more realistic. And you can see the track bed sort of in a speckledy sort of format to sort of simulate ballast as well. The original versions of all these tracks were brown. You can see this is a very old uni track that you may have never seen. Brown uni track. There it is. Because a lot of the track bed gets sort of quite dirty and rusty, but they've all changed to a grey coloured system more recently. So you've got these different track systems. People do build layouts with a Pico track and flexible track, etc., but sort of a more permanent sort of arrangement. Tomix has also built up this track system, which is called wide track and has a wider base. This is sort of track, it's got a separate side here that you can join on, and so these tracks will sort of join up and give you your proper parallel spacing as well, and it sort of covers the whole area with a ballast representation as well. It sort of looks a lot more realistic. There's another difference as well. The track centering for a double track in the uni track is 33mm, whereas with the Tomix system it's 37mm. So again, that's another way where they're sort of not quite more compatible. Okay, and they've also, both companies have brought up a system where you've got sort of elevated track for curves. You can see the difference between the train here and this one, where the outside track is a slight distance higher, gives a sort of more realistic operational, and probably means you can run your trains a bit faster because they're sort of not fighting against gravity on the corner. You can see this has got that wide base track here, the Tomix system. And this is Kako's a uni tram, which again you probably might be familiar with in America. They've built out the system with a tram track. Because their tracks are so close together, they've had to make them a bit wider on curves because of the narrow radius. And it all sort of clips together. They've got streets with the road markings and bases for buildings, and it's all sort of fairly fixed. They do curves, a few actual turnouts, etc., but they don't sort of have much variety. You just sort of make some circles running around in a city sort of thing. But you're sort of limited with what you can do because it's all sort of pre-painted. Tomix have a similar system, but they have 3 different curves. They have a sharper turn. They also make bases with a sort of standard grey road base. They also make this cobbled sort of street trackage. And they also make a base that actually has grass. If you want to sort of track like that in a grassy area, in a country area, and it has little fences that you can clip to the side as well. Yeah, this is sort of showing some of the curves that are made for the double track in the Tomix system. You can actually get 4 sets of double track trains all running parallel with the different configurations. So yeah, that's the different track available. With the trains, I sort of talked about some of the different models there. Most of the sets that you buy, they come in these bookcase type packages. Again, this is the Cardo, which you probably might be familiar with. They come with an insert for the different cars, sort of it shuts, and again, it's sort of like about the A4 size paper size bookshelf, the little bookcase that you put on your shelf. You can buy these even empty, so you can put your separate trains in and sort of store them nicely. And so here's a sort of passenger train set that comes in a case. This is sort of one of the older style passenger trains that wouldn't be running anymore. Here's a bullet train set in a case. This one's quite a rare train. You can see it's quite colourful. And because it's yellow, it's actually called Doctor Yellow. And it's called Doctor because what it does, it runs only at night when the system is shut down and does diagnosis and checking out the track and the overhead wire for any anomalies or things that need to be sort of fixed. So it's a sort of technical diagnosis train. So that's what it's called, Doctor Yellow. And here we have, this is a display I've got at home actually. Here's some of the diesel trains. You can see how colourful they are. A lot of the sort of rural lines, they paint up their trains in sort of advertising schemes, or some of these are advertising some anime characters or TV series. And in some cases, these four up the top here, they're a different colour on each side. That's something I like about collecting them all, and they're sort of nice to display. These are all single diesel cars with a cab each end that would run individually in a sort of rural or branch line. Here's another passenger set. This is one of the sets from Micro-Ace. Micro-Ace specialise in what they call in Japan, they call joyful trains. This is an older sort of passenger car set that's used up its life, and it's been refurbished and painted, etc., to run as sort of like a tourist train. You can see it's a lot more modern. It's got an observation sort of room at each end, and there's sort of dozens of these running by the Japanese companies as well. They hire them out to tourist groups, or they run them on weekends, etc., sometimes even with steam locos. And as I said, they're called joyful trains. Micro-Ace make quite a lot of different models. They're all very colourful, etc., as well. Nice to collect. And here's one for you. Have you ever seen a train that looks like this? So this is another model. This is one of the trains you can catch from the airport in Osaka to the main city, the Airport Express, with that sort of front on it, and the windows that look like four doors. So a lot of the trains, particularly the more modern ones, you sometimes seen from that advertising posters earlier on, they're quite modern and quite futuristic looking. Greenmax, as I said, they make some kits. Here's a passenger car kit that you put together and paint up. That's all they used to do in the early days, but they do make pre-painted versions and ready-to-run versions now. And they also make buildings. So we'll go from the trains now into the other accessories and things you can buy. So Greenmax, again, used to make just kits of these little buildings. To see some little Japanese shops here. They used to be just ones you could paint up. But now they're making pre-painted ones again. I think people in Japan are getting lazier than they used to be. So Greenmax make a sort of fairly good range of older style Japanese buildings. You've got some older style buildings like this that have been put together as well, painted up, some signs put on, etc. This range, you might recognise some of these buildings, again made by Kato. They've made some quite nice modern city buildings that they sort of rebadge and rename for the American market as well. So some of the buildings here, most of the buildings of Kato, you've got some of the other ones here from comics as well. So you've got quite a good range of city buildings if you build up, like you've seen, if you see the layouts that I presented in the previous programs, the city buildings that were available that sort of fill the layout. Most of these sort of pre-made, ready to run with some details and stickers to put on. They're not actually kits. And some little Japanese houses as well. Oops. But a lot of these buildings, without putting the signs and that on, you can use in other countries. American people I know have used them for layouts, European, etc. Here's some more little shops. Tomix make another range of buildings in the Tomitech range, which covers. They're sort of like kits where the walls and roofs, etc., put together and you sort of assemble them. They also make series of buses, trains, cars, all the other accessories that go on your layout, figures, scenery stuff. So the majority of all the things that would have been on my layout were sort of probably from this range. Micro Ice only make trains. They don't make any scenery. They brought out a track range that didn't actually work, and they sort of dropped it not long after because they couldn't compete with the other companies. Here's some of the other buildings that are available from the Tomitech range, sort of larger and smaller suburban buildings, the subway entrance, etc. Here. Yeah, so that sort of covers all the different ranges of stuff that's available in the modelling. As I said, it's probably the biggest train modelling industry in the world, and there's dozens of, everywhere you go, there's model train hobby shops with a model train section or fully dedicated model train shops. If you get the catalogues for these companies, the Cardo and the Tomix catalogue, which each catalogue is sort of 400 or 500 pages in itself. In the back of the catalogue, you'll see a list of all the retailers, and there'll be a dozen pages of all the shops that are stocking their products. So you go to any city, there's dozens of shops within walking distance where you are. They're very hard to find, of course, if you can't read the signs or anything, and you can't work out where the address is, but they're all there. So that sort of covers pretty much what I wanted to talk in general about what the trains were like overall and what's available in the modelling system. So any questions about anything?
I have a question. Do you know why they decided to go with the BBB arrangement instead of a CC arrangement for locomotives?
Not really, other than the fact it probably also helps to distribute the weight more evenly. Because they started off building sort of fairly lightweight track, and they sort of had to build it up and develop it a bit better when they were getting more trains, more high-speed trains. So to get bigger locos that were sort of more powerful, and the track wasn't sort of that heavy gauge, they probably needed to spread the weight out a bit more, just so they could still run something in the specifications they needed. And that's just continued to the present day.
Right, thank you.
Mitsubishi built a locomotive for New Zealand, a diesel electric with that BBB arrangement.
Okay.
Also, EMD, in one of their forays into a electric locomotive, the top half looks similar to an SD40, but the bottom half is BBB, and that was to spread out the traction.
Yeah. I guess it spreads out the weight more and also gives you more wheels on the track driving for the power.
Hey, Doug. I replaced some couplers on some Kato locomotives and cars, and that coupler you showed us looks a lot different than what I replaced. Did they change those?
Well, what was the loco?
Was it an American F7, I think it was?
Okay. They probably also might have a range of stuff that fits their American range, which is different to what's available in Japan.
Oh.
I know most people are changing their couplers in America to the KD or the MT or whatever type it is, which also is sort of made to fit a lot of the American stuff that they manufacture. So that's quite rare. I've seen people do that in Japan as well, put sort of KDs on their stuff, but they mainly either stick with what the trains come with, or they change to the ones that are already displayed. So probably just another version for a different market, I would imagine.
Well, Doug, you're fascinating. Can't tell you how much I've enjoyed your presentation this evening and the others that you made. And if you ever want to come back and share more information with us, just let me know. You're welcome anytime.
Not sure what else there is, but unless you can think up something.
Well, we'll try.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Doug, thank you again. I really do appreciate it. Phil Ethel, are you still here?
I think he literally just left because he said he had something else to go to.
Okay. Then I'll try to catch him next time. For next time, I want you to know that we have Jeff Shoemaker, his HON 30 Great Lakes Modeling Group. And we've got special segments with Martin Beckville on scratch building, and build along with Greg and Chris on the Connor Wingo model. So we've got a full show coming up for the next one. I hope you've enjoyed tonight. I hope you learned something, and I hope we'll see you again soon.